on Reporting Scotland this Wednesday lunchtime. Unemployment rises in Scotland as it drops across the UK. And angry exchanges at Prime Minister's questions over how Brexit will affect Scotland. Hello there, good afternoon. The number of Scots seeking work rose over the autumn by 11,000, according to the latest figures from the Office for National Statistics. It means the Scottish unemployment rate is 5.1%, higher than the UK rate. John McManus reports.
It's still an uncertain time for the economy in Scotland. This latest data shows the job market lagging behind the rest of the UK. The Office for National Statistics says 11,000 more people were seeking work between September and November. That means a total of 139,000 people were unemployed. The overall rate of unemployment is 5.1%, compared to 4.8% for the whole of the UK. A number of factors could be at play: the downturn in oil and gas and Brexit fears. Some parts of the economy are trying to manage that uncertainty. This Paisley company is thriving, offering flexible storage for businesses and even office space.
What we try and do is take away that uncertainty surrounding it. So we hope that the business come in, they can take the space for a month, they can grow the business, they can bring it back down in size again. We basically try to make it work for them.
There's other good news. The Scottish Government says youth unemployment dropped last year. But it's also published data today showing very slow growth in economic output in the year to last September. John McManus, Reporting Scotland.
There have been heated exchanges in the Commons this lunchtime over how Brexit will affect Scotland. The UK government has been accused of a Little Britain Brexit and of stringing the people of Scotland along. The Prime Minister has responded by saying the real threat to Scotland comes from SNP plans for independence. Our Westminster correspondent David Porter is outside the Houses of Parliament for us this lunchtime. David.
Katrina, a day on from the Prime Minister's keynote address on Brexit, and the political reverberations are still being felt here at Westminster and indeed at Holyrood as well. Yesterday, Theresa May confirmed that as part of the UK's exit from the EU that we would be leaving the single market. In response to that, the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, said that that would make a second independence referendum in Scotland more likely and closer. Today here at Westminster, the whole issue of Brexit has dominated proceedings. Scottish questions were dominated by the whole issue, as indeed were Prime Minister's question time this lunchtime, where the SNP accused the UK government of wanting to preside over a Little Britain Brexit.
80,000 people may lose their jobs in Scotland as a result of the hard Tory Brexit plan of the Prime Minister. Does the Prime Minister believe that this is a price worth paying for her Little Britain Brexit?
I repeat what I said earlier. We will be working to ensure that we get the best possible deal in terms of access to the single market and continuing to cooperate in partnership with the member states of the remaining 27 member states of the European Union. But the Right Honourable Gentleman once again talks about the possibility of a negative impact on Scotland if Scotland were not part of the single market. His party is dedicated to taking Scotland out of the single market by taking it out of the United Kingdom.
Now, aside from the public rhetoric, the negotiations between the UK and the Scottish governments are continuing. Tomorrow there will be a meeting between UK ministers and representatives from the devolved administrations, including Scotland, when they will be discussing the Scottish government's plans for Brexit. Now, that meeting will be a private one, and it is likely that it will probably be a lot more good-tempered than some of the public exchanges we have seen of late. But that said, Katrina, whatever happens, no one is under any illusions that this Brexit process is going to be a lengthy one, and it is probably going to be a very bumpy ride.
Hey David, thank you. The Health Secretary, Shona Robertson, will make a statement to Parliament this afternoon on the delay to plans for a network of trauma centres across the country. It was announced last week that the centres will not be up and running for at least 3 years due to the scale and complexity of the changes. They had been due to open in Aberdeen, Glasgow, Edinburgh and Dundee later this year. Police have confirmed that a bullet has been recovered from a tree beside the Glasgow school where a man was shot on Monday. 35-year-old Ross Monaghan was attacked after dropping his child off at St George's Primary in Pennylee. 4 years ago, he was cleared of the murder of Kevin Gerbil Carroll. Andy Murray's through to the third round of the Australian Open tennis. He beat the 19-year-old Russian Andrei Rublev in straight sets, but the victory was not without its troubles, as Keredinitsan reports.
In the golden setting sun, a memorial in bronze to one of tennis's all-time greats. They even named the stadium after him. And among those congregating outside the Rod Laver Arena, some support for Andy Murray.
Absolutely, Andy, tonight.
He's got to do it, you know.
He will do it. He will do it.
Determined to repay such faith, the world number one walked into the Melbourne night session to face a Russian qualifier over 150 places below him in the rankings. The early stages were even, until Murray made his move to break Rublev for 4-2 before seeing out the set 6-3. And then the golfing class became clear as cracks in the 19-year-old's composure were exposed. If the first set was competitive, the second wasn't, won by the Scot without conceding a game. But just when everything was going swimmingly, would the unexpected derail Andy Murray's bid for the title? Plenty to worry about for the top seed and his entourage, but how would the ankle affect him for the rest of the match? His movement didn't seem too impaired. He was able to see off Russia's Rublev 6-2 in the third for another straight sets win.
Yes, despite that slight injury scare, Andy Murray is safely through to the third round. Played 2-1-2, sets conceded 0. Next up, America's Sam Querrey on Friday for a place in the last 16. Keredinitsan reporting Scotland, Melbourne.
The battered remains of a yacht have been found on a beach in the Western Isles after apparently being adrift in the Atlantic for 3 years. The crew of the catamaran Be Good 2 were rescued by the US Coast Guard after getting into difficulties 300 miles off the coast of Virginia in January 2014. Now the barnacle-covered hull of the yacht has been found washed ashore on South Uist, 24 months after it was abandoned on the other side of the Atlantic. Well, time now to get today's weather forecast and Cossers at the map.
Thank you, Katrina. Good afternoon to you all. Well, we're staying with largely settled conditions. It's mostly dry out there, but largely cloudy. Here's the satellite map from earlier today, and you can see a blanket of cloud across much of the country, except for the northeast here. We've got a hole in the cloud, and here, bright blue skies. Weather watchers sending in our pictures from across these areas, teasing us with plenty in the way of sunshine, but for most of us this afternoon it's cloudy and it's staying mild. The wind's still fairly brisk across the Northern Isles, the Western Isles for a time too, but tending to ease as we head through to the rest of the day, and mild temperatures reaching around 9 to 11 Celsius at best. Now during the evening, fairly cloudy conditions continuing across the west, thick enough for a few spits and spots of rain perhaps across the northwest and the Western Isles, and some rain pushing into the Shetland for a time too. Across the northeast, though, some clearer skies, and temperatures here may fall to around 3 or 4 Celsius, but mild elsewhere, lows of around 6 to 7 degrees. And for tomorrow, very similar conditions, a lot of cloud around, the best of any sunshine across the northeast once more. In the cloud, though, looking at temperatures around 8 to 10 Celsius, so still fairly mild out there. And once again, the cloud may be thick enough for a few spits and spots of light rain and drizzle up over the hills in the west. Now, high pressure stays with us by the end of the week too. Fairly settled conditions once more, largely dry. The winds will fall light as well. But for Friday, it does look as if there may be more in the way of brighter conditions across the north, across the southwest too, and a little less mild, 6 to 8 degrees. And that's your forecast.
Thanks very much for that, Cosser. And that's all for now. There's more news, sport and weather on Reporting Scotland at 6:30 tonight. Until then, from everybody on the Lunchtime team, have a very good afternoon. Bye-bye.